and commit yourself to this, then it will bring and generate all other things. This is why Imam Raza said, Kalimatu la ilaha illallah hisni. Faman dakhala hisni amina min adab. Then Imam moved and again stopped. Maybe because Imam wanted them to realize that this is not part of the hadith, which is from the Prophet. Then Imam said, Bishartaha wa shurutaha. Of course, there are conditions and requirements. Wa ana min shurutaha. And I am one of the conditions. To believe in Imam as a person who has been appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you, this is one of the requirements of Tawheed, and one of the requirements of being saved by Tawheed. So you see how far-reaching and how comprehensive is the concept of Tawheed, that even the idea of imamah or imamate, as the English people say, is put and is integrated inside Tawheed. Okay, so Tawheed is very important. Let me give you some idea so that you can reflect, and then inshallah in the next session we will go into further explanation of those ideas. Normally, the scholars divide Tawheed into different aspects. If I want to classify, I can say there are two general types of Tawheed. Something that we need to believe and something that we need to practice. Theoretical Tawheed and practical Tawheed. Theoretical Tawheed involves three things. Tawheed in respect to divine essence. At-Tawheed fi Zat, or what we say At-Tawheed Zati. Unity of God in respect to His essence. Which means there is only one God. He has no partner, no parts. Neither he has partner, nor he has any parts. He is simple, simple opposite to compound. Okay? He is simple means he has no parts and he has no partner. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. So this is unity in respect to divine essence. Second, unity in respect to his attributes. At-Tawheed fi Sifat or At-Tawheed al-Sifati. What does it mean? It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes are identical with his essence. His attributes are not accidental, are not additional to his essence. Allah's knowledge is not something which has been added to his essence. Allah's power is not something which has come from outside and has been added to his essence. The very same thing which is Allah's knowledge, is Allah's power, is Allah's mercy, is Allah's will, is Allah's love, and all are the same as his essence. So it's one thing from which we can understand concepts. Okay? So this is very important part of Tawheed, and inshallah we will talk about it more. And third, Tawheed in respect to divine acts. At-Tawheed fil af'al. What does it mean? It means that whatever happens in this world is an act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no one who can do anything in this world except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we do something, this is again created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can act, we can do something, but all is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All is because of the power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. Like, for example, when you put a key in the lock and you unlock the door, you say that this is the key which is unlocking the door. But this is not the key itself. This is your hand. And this is not only your hand. This is you who is behind all these movements of the hand and the fingers and the key and the lock. So we have some role, but after careful assessment, we find that this is act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is no one who can do anything in this world unless it has been not only permitted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only been authorized by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very important requirement of Tawheed. Okay, these three are all technical Tawheed, something that we need to believe. But there is also something that we need to practice, and that is Tawheed in respect to worship. This is something to practice, not only to know. We must not worship anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Tawheed. This is at Tawheed for ubudiyah. Only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is it enough just to know this, that we should only worship Allah? No. It's not enough just to know this. We need to practice this. We need to worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then each of these can be further detailed. For example, when you say all the acts are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it involves a Tawheed fil khaliqiyya, that Allah is the only creator. A Tawheed fil rububiyyah. All these come out of that. Or when we say we can only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the same is true about obedience. The only one who deserves to be obeyed is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has created us free. No one can ask me to obey him except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people who have authority from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the prophets, like imams, like parents, we obey them. Why? Because Allah has asked us to obey them. Allah has asked us to obey your parents. Even if you are a person who has his own children and grandchildren, still you must obey your father. This is the authority that Allah has given to parents. But if your father asks you to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is automatically losing this authority. You don't worship anyone other than Allah, so you don't obey anyone by disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are some people that I myself may have accepted to obey them. That is something voluntary. For example, we want to organize a society or a community, then we choose someone to be, for example, our director or our president, then we say, okay, we listen to you. But he doesn't have authority as such. This is the authority that we are giving to him. So no one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has authority from himself. It's only Allah who deserves to be obeyed. Otherwise we are all free. And this has lots of implications also in political theory of Islam. We are very free people in Islam. It's not that everyone can come in and say, okay, you must obey me. But there are ways and there are techniques to somehow concentrate power somewhere in the way that doesn't conflict with the rights of people. Anyway, the major aspects of Tawheed are these four, and as I said, they may imply other things. I just repeat, and then inshallah in the next session, inshallah we go into further details. So Tawheed in respect to divine essence, which means that he has no part nor partner. Tawheed in respect to divine attributes, which means that all his attributes are identical with each other in existence and identical with his essence. Only the concepts are different. Tawheed in respect to divine act, which means that everything which is created is an act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything which happens is an act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who can originate anything. It's only Allah. And then Tawheed in worship. You should only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and nothing else deserves our worship. Thank you very much for your attention, and may inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our knowledge and our commitment. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.
Namaz in the main hall, inshallah.